So folks, we're about to begin. There are a few extra seats. If anybody wants to try and have a look, there are a few individual seats in the rows if anyone's still looking to sit down. So you're all very welcome, and I'm actually going to hand over quite quickly to Vincent Keenan, the chair of the board of the Wheel, to make you all welcome and to kick off our event today.
Thanks, Susan. It's always a privilege to stand up in this very historic place. You know, it's not often you kind of get to speak in these places and you forget that the Taoiseach was just reminded the history of the place. So just to acknowledge that. Taoiseach, Minister Carnegie, colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome you here today to launch a landmark report which sets out a vision for addressing the many challenges we have across our island. This vision is a combination of the iCommunity, a joint initiative of the Wheel and our sister organisation NICFA, supported by the Shared Island Unit in the Department of Taoiseach and the Department of Communities and the Department of Foreign Affairs Reconciliation Fund. Many key issues facing civil society are now global, and it makes sense to have a strong regional and international collaboration. The Wheel and NICFA have been working together for many years, sharing challenges faced by our members who span the diverse civil society organisation and networks across the island. And on that note, I'd just like to pay tribute to Seamus, the CEO of NICFA, and Deirdre, who have personally developed that relationship over many, many years. And just to note that Seamus is going to be retiring later on this year when they get a replacement. And as many of you will know, Deirdre will also be going on to a new challenge in the Irish Red Cross at the end of this year, and we wish them both every success. Last week, the boards of the Wheel and NICFA held a joint meeting here in Dublin, at which again we reiterated our shared commitment to an ongoing All-Ireland collaboration. The report identifies an ambitious programme of work for civil society shareholders to advance on a shared island basis. We look forward to working with our respective membership in progressing this vital work in the months and years ahead. And just on that note, the two boards of NICFA and the Wheel are both representative of our membership. And I think it was very interesting last week that many of the board members seen a huge appetite themselves to be involved in that, but also for the member organisations. The vision we are presenting today is the fruit of consultations with dozens of communities and organisations over the past year. The report details the positive story of what happens when people north and south collaborate to agree on priorities for action in areas that matter to them. The themes chosen make sense on an all-Ireland basis, such as achieving a just transition to a decarbonised future, digital connectedness and inclusion, and working together, developing the island's rural economies and social enterprises, and addressing the biodiversity crisis. All issues covered fall under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We look forward to implementing this vision in a new phase of the iCommunity programme, and we hope and expect this foundation will be built upon when we seek further support through Peace Plus funding announced recently for 2023. I'd like to thank the Taoiseach, first of all, for coming today, but for his enduring commitment to the Shared Island Initiative and to his team in the Shared Island Unit, Minister Hargey and her team at the Department of Communities, our colleagues in the Department of Foreign Affairs for their commitment and ongoing support for this critical and essential project. I would also like to thank many of the community and voluntary organisations, social enterprises, civil society leaders and other stakeholders who contributed to the project over the past year. Your contribution was clear, and when reading and indeed seeing the vision outlined, I look forward to hearing some of the highlighted in Susie and Alex's presentation a little later on. And I'd also like to thank Susie, where is she? Oh, there, and Alex, and indeed all the staff in NICFA and the Wheel who contributed to this project. They did it in super time. And at one point last December, we were concerned would they be able to do it, but they certainly pulled off Stormer in that regard. And I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'm quite, the room is full, so I think that indicates an enthusiasm for this and an appetite for it. Collaboration in our sector is in our DNA. We don't survive otherwise if we don't. And we hope that you will join us to be part of the next chapter of this exciting project. Thank you.
Thank you. And to continue that, we have the Chief Executive of NICFA, the Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action, Seamus McAlevey. Thank you.
Taoiseach, Minister Hargey. First of all, an apology from Olwen Liner, who's the chair of NICFA. Family commitment meant she couldn't be with us today, but I think fully endorses everything that is happening. And as Vincent said, in terms of the joint board meeting that we had between NICFA and the Wheel last week, all of our board came away very enthused in terms of the work that has been carried out in the project and what will be done in the future. So very important. So I can endorse very much Vincent's words, and also like to say thanks to the Taoiseach and the Minister for their support with regard to the project. And indeed the challenge that the Taoiseach threw out to us early on in terms of what we could do in terms of the shared island. And if you think of the iconic projects, they tend to focus on the big infrastructure issues. But what happens in society, what happens between people are incredibly important. So that's very much what we're trying to focus on and to look at. Over the years, our attitude in NICFA with regard to voluntary and community organisations in Northern Ireland has always been to look up and look out what people are doing elsewhere and see what we can learn. And we've looked far and near and a lot in terms of south of the border, and we've engaged, as people know, on many things. And with regard to I suppose what some people call the cross-border work, it's two aspects for us. There's the border communities themselves, and as people know, they tend to be a little bit peripheral wherever they are. They're the furthest points quite often from the political centre. And if you think about the European Union, it created the Interreg programme to try and deal with the border issues. And I remember quite a number of years back when things were really difficult there, difficult for people. And people work out their own solutions. So government can help or government can hinder. And I'm glad to see that our governments are working together to help people deal with the difficulties of living in the border areas. But also, it's about the wider issues that impact the voluntary and community sector in Ireland, North and South. And we've collaborated quite a lot on things like structural funds plans and the Common Chapter. Quite a number of years back, organisations in Northern Ireland and the South focusing very much on our common issues. I mean, indeed, I was also a member of the Task Force on Active Citizenship that was created by your predecessor, Bertie Ahern, and the issues that we were concerned about then very much impacted people in Northern Ireland as well as it did in the south of Ireland. So we're always happy, I think, to play a part in initiatives like that develop our sector's understanding of how things are changing. I think the other thing that clearly has happened through the COVID crisis is that a lot has changed in society. We knew that digital change was moving quite rapidly. We knew that we were in some sort of fourth industrial revolution, but what we've seen is that speed up during the whole COVID crisis. And we want to be able to tap into that and to use the experience that our sector has gained very much as spontaneous responders in that crisis, but use that to build for the future. And I think as Vincent remarked about the various aspects of the focus of this project so far, there is a lot that we might do to help rebalance society, both geographically in terms of rural areas in Ireland, North and South, in terms of the West, because people can work in different places now. And we need to be thinking about how that will pan out in the longer term. And from our point of view, I think voluntary and community organisations want to be towards the head of the curve rather than coming in its wake. So there is so much clearly to be done in the future, and I think this iCommunity project has sparked the interest very much so in that. So I'm looking forward, obviously, to the launch of the report, but also looking forward as to what will happen next over the years to come. And on our part, it's about how we complement people into the developments that will take place north and south in Ireland. Thank you very much.
So I'm introducing myself. I am the project director for iCommunity, and I got involved in this in December last year. And I know that there's people in the room who've been part of the conversation, but there are other people in the room who maybe haven't as much awareness as to what this project is about. So rather than just talking, we put together a little video. If you're from a certain age and a certain place, you say, roll it there, Colette. But we're going to just move on and play that video now for you, just to give you an overview, so you'll hear my voice on that. The community and voluntary sector across the island of Ireland has responded for many years to all of the needs and challenges and crises that come upon us. In recent years, these have seemed ever more intense with the pandemic, increased migration and climate change, amongst other challenges. In addition, frameworks, funding mechanisms have changed in a new political context in the community sector in Northern Ireland. In light of those changes, there could be threats to cross-border and all-island collaboration. iCommunity was born as an initiative of the two umbrella organisations for civil society, the Wheel and Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action. With a long history of collaboration, they decided to act to convene civil society to discuss practical solutions to pressing issues of our time. iCommunity is a hub for work to strengthen and build new relationships to support the action on the ground in communities across the island. To start work on a shared vision, 5 themes were chosen to reflect the areas of shared challenge, both locally and globally, such as climate change and the biodiversity crisis, the rising inequality highlighted by the pandemic, as well as rural sustainability and digital inclusion. iCommunity was launched in December 2021 and is supporting non-profits and social enterprises in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland to discover each other and to discuss the benefits of collaboration in their shared interest areas.
I want to commend the Wheel and NICVA on the work that they have done to get this exciting project up and running. They pushed ahead with the work, and now this project seeks to bring together civil society on both parts of the island.
The Department for Communities is proud to support this new all-island initiative that will bring communities together to discuss solutions to our shared problems. I think the specific themes that have been identified within the programme around rural sustainability, recovery from the pandemic itself, developing the island economy, digital inclusion, and achieving a just transition around decarbonisation really resonate very strongly with everybody in society. It's some of the key talking points, but also within governments as well, as we start to grapple and to look at these issues in a more systemic way going forward. And obviously, as we navigate our way through the challenges that we're facing, it is imperative that we all collaborate and work together to build the capacity across our voluntary and community sector and to enable it to offer the continued and renewed support that it has done with communities.
iCommunity convened conversations, workshops, and created a podcast called Across Divides, highlighting examples of existing all-island practice while developing new opportunities to work together on shared challenges. A new website, iCommunityHub.org, is gathering together some of those news and views and case studies. The podcast is viewable there as a mini web series. This short video gives just a flavour of the level of engagement and enthusiasm throughout this first phase of iCommunity, and invites and hopefully entices people to get involved in coming together, finding and lobbying for support for the solutions that communities are so capable of creating when we work together on this island. So that should mean I don't need to say anything else, right? So I'm going to be very brief just as well. We need to keep certain timings very tight. But really what I'm here to do is to launch this report. You've got it on your seats. I'm hoping that people have a very good read of it, but also you can see that we wanted to make it as accessible as possible. And some reports are hard and dense to read. And so this has a lot of visuals and summaries, which we gathered live at the events that we, so that we were listening and reflecting back to people what we heard them saying. And I think it was touched upon the relationship, the things that have changed since the pandemic. I think one of them has been the relationship between funders and the community sector, because there was a need to respond quickly and to trust and respect the sector, and to see how the sector taps into local intelligence. And so you'll hear that with some of our speakers later on as well, talking about the different themes and different aspects of the whole conversation. The themes were important because we chose things that were global in nature and make sense on an all-island basis, you know, and that was proven by the engagement. We really had an incredibly high level of engagement, and we still have today. So I'm not going to say too much more. You can particularly look at the recommendations for policy and the thematics that people, you know, kind of tried to condense down through each conversation and say, these are things that would help. And some of them are the ways that happened during the pandemic, where there was a high level of trust, increase in flexibility in the funding, and bureaucratic responses were removed, and that kind of came up. And then there are some specific ones around each of the themed areas. So I draw your attention to those. But I'm going to hand over now to Alec McMaster, who has been a very large part of compiling this report, but was also the co-producer of the podcast. And I asked him to reflect on those conversations, as well as a lot of the conversations that were held in the workshops and online spaces are contained within the report too. So Alex.
Thank you, Susie. Taoiseach, Minister Hargey, and everyone who's here. This has been a fantastic project to be involved with for the past few months. I've been on it since January. I mostly involved with producing the podcast, and then also in the write-up of the report. But in another job, I am an ecologist, and I'm working mostly underwater. And just last week, I was in Carlingford Lough, leading a team of divers to survey the seabed. Similar to Lough Foyle, which forms the other end of the Irish border, Carlingford has seen an onslaught from shellfish farming, which, combined with the pollution carried by the Foyle and Newry rivers, means that both lochs are quite dark and turbid. But the life that we found that existed beneath the surface was absolutely astounding. We found an array of starfish, anemones, nudibranch, lobsters, sponges, and even rare blue-rayed limpets. The rich biodiversity was a real sort of tangible source of hope and something to cling to. And that night in Carlingford, with the divers and with a few of the members of the communities around the loch, we were able to use those kinds of inspirations as a real instigator for conversations about the possibilities for communities on both sides of the loch to work together for its protection. And we even had conversations about potential restoration. And what was really beautiful about that was that there were already so many examples from all around the island that those communities could learn from. A few months ago, we spoke on the Across Divides podcast about the necessity of all-island work to tackle the biodiversity crisis. And we weren't just talking about possibilities and pipe dreams. We spoke with the Rivers Trust about their work with farmers on rivers that cross the border, working with them on issues of pollution. We spoke with people involved in the All-Island Pollinator Plan, who are working to protect some of the island's species of bees. I can't remember how many there were, but it was something like 200. It was wild. Bees and rivers, they don't really respect those kind of jurisdictional boundaries that have been imposed by humankind, and that applies all around the world. These conversations not only highlighted the need for an array of challenges to be tackled on an all-island basis, but the importance of moving even beyond our coasts and putting those conversations in a global context. The climate and biodiversity crises are prime examples of this, and it's why we see all these global summits around it. But in our episode on mental health, we talked about intergenerational trauma associated with the Troubles in Northern Ireland, but the impossibility of addressing those without considering violent conflicts from all around the globe. We also looked at learnings that could be brought to the island from social enterprises across Europe. And in our first episode on the role of the arts, language and culture as a vibrant part of civil society, Paula McFetridge of Kibosh Theatre spoke of the need to place conversations about conflict, equality, pain and loss, hope and growth into a global context. What else really struck us during the podcast was the willingness and interest of people to be engaged, who were engaged in these initiatives, to share their learnings right across all the 5 themes of the project. Not only their learnings, but their successes and also their failures, and the need for room for failure that a lot of them expressed. Many of the conversations that started in our studio in Belfast carried on afterwards. People would sit around in the studio exchanging contact details, discussing new ideas that are still flourishing even now. And that was really kind of the crucial point that we found, was that there were people all around the island who want to become engaged in tackling the biggest crises of our time, whether they be the cost of living, digital inclusion, or a pandemic. And like the divers in Carlingford, who were just at the start of looking at these kinds of ideas, what they often needed was to see these inspirations, these visionary projects, and to learn from them. And that was where the willingness and enthusiasm from our guests to share their learnings and their experiences really, really had its value. It means they can become part of wider movements for positive change, addressing issues that span not just across the island, but right across the wider world. And a lot of the work that we talked about was not on a large scale, which is why this is so important, because it was all made up of individual but monumental efforts that were growing up slowly from the grassroots. A lot of people, some of the examples were a group of people in direct provision who started a business, or secondary school students who formed a union to prioritise their mental health during the pandemic. It was by connecting the dots between these efforts that wider and stronger movements could be built. And the deeper that these were rooted in communities, we found, the better that they hold fast against growing global crises. In ecology, we know that a rich, diverse and interconnected ecosystem is a strong one that will be resilient in the face of change. And throughout the podcast series, we discovered how rich and diverse the community and voluntary sector is all across this island. Fostering connections between it and feeding the enthusiasm of its many vibrant and highly motivated actors can only drive positive change. Like the communities that I met last week in Carlingford, the many actors we interacted with during the podcast series are so close to the challenges at hand that their efforts and their motivations are practically unwavering. And that's what made the podcasts so engaging and the conversations so interesting for us. These are the people who've demonstrated time and time again that if given the opportunity, they can create such meaningful change. Taoiseach, Minister Harvey, and to everyone who's present, I hope that you get a chance to listen to the podcast, that you feel the same enthusiasm as Susie and I have gleaned from the work of its participants, many of whom are here today, and that you're able to support the visionary outlook that they present for what a future island and what a future community sector might look like. Thank you.
And now I'm going to invite the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, to come up and make some remarks and hopefully respond to the launch today. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Susie. It's bora ma dúspara mo bhuichas gwaildi vesoctin cuirev live con an torscáil seo a chuir fián seol go hifigiúil le ara Hargi Cuma. I'm delighted to be here, genuinely, and I want to thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here with Mr. Hargi and also my colleague in the European Parliament, Barry Andrews, and other public representatives I may not have seen quite yet. Just to say, to participate in this launch of the iCommunity project report by the Wheel and the Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action. Could I just say to Alex, thank you, and in terms of the divers of Carlingford, maybe you should get a project together about the restoration and submit it to the Shared Island Unit. I know the Shared Island Unit always get worried because every kind of audience I address, there's another project coming out of it that demands funding. But that's something exactly what we want to do through Shared Island, is cross-border biodiversity projects. We are working on some others, and I could think of nothing better than the restoration of Carlingford Lough, and that we would contribute to that. And I found both, Susan, your contribution very invigorating. I want also to join in acknowledging the roles of Seamus McAlevey and Deirdre Garvey in terms of the collaboration down through the years. We've known Deirdre for quite some time and is moving on in a few months to a worthy project. But you've been a hugely able and a very energetic CEO of the Wheel since 2000, Deirdre. You've brought the network from its earliest days through to today, where the Wheel in the Republic is a voice, a connector, a multiplier of the vital work of more than 2,000 community sector and charity organisations. And you've been a tireless champion, and all of your members in the Wheel, an inspiration really in terms of the positive power of citizens in our society. And you and Seamus have really powered that on an all-island basis. I think it's fantastic to see so many people here this afternoon reflecting the diversity and the vibrancy of the community and the voluntary sector and of social enterprises and philanthropic and charitable enterprises also. Your iCommunity project is a very important contribution to the government's Shared Island initiative, through which we are engaging with all communities and political traditions to build consensus around a shared future underpinned by the Good Friday Agreement. And we're doing this by taking forward an agenda for more ambitious, impactful cooperation with the Northern Ireland Executive and British Government through the framework of the Good Friday Agreement, focused on addressing the major shared challenges for this island. Also seeking new opportunities to cooperate and invest across our borders and communities, including through our €1 billion Shared Island Fund. Deepening understanding of the whole island in economic, social and cultural and political terms through a major and unprecedented programme of published research, which is really gaining critical mass and proving to be very insightful. And also by fostering the space, which both Susie and Alex spoke about, including through our Shared Island Dialogue series, to look to the future on this island in a positive way that doesn't compromise anybody's identity or aspirations, unionist, nationalist or neither. I remember when I launched our Shared Island initiative about 2 years ago, just up the hill in Dublin Castle, Deirdre Garvey participated, spoke of the readiness of community and voluntary organisations to provide leadership in this endeavour, of your unique capacity to facilitate inclusive, practical, meaningful ways for communities to interact and collaborate around shared challenges. And Deirdre said memorably that for civil society, and I quote, "The building of consensus and respect for diversity through dialogue and engagement is our very DNA," unquote. I then said that day that the government would work with the Wheel and the Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action to support a new iconic project, to help bring civil society and communities together and to work on common cause around shared concerns. Because that is the very essence of what I was trying to achieve in establishing the Shared Island Initiative in the first place. So it is hugely welcome that in the time since, the ambitious iCommunity project was developed by the Wheel and NICFA. You secured support through the Reconciliation Fund of the Department of Foreign Affairs and my department's Shared Island Unit. The Northern Ireland Executive also supported the project. And I very much welcome the Minister for Communities, Deirdre Hargey, MLA, who is with us today, will also be contributing. And as set out in today's report, the iCommunity project has delivered an impressive and intensive first year of engagement. Today is a moment to acknowledge this progress and all of the hard work involved, to hear reflections, to consider the recommendations in this report and to look ahead to a continuing strong role for this project and for the community and voluntary sector in our shared island approach and in shaping the future of this island. As we do that, it is worth remembering the centrality of civic engagement in the Good Friday Agreement. It refers, the agreement, to civil society's vital role in consolidating peace and political agreement. Recognising that building peace and making progress on reconciliation is always fundamentally, of course, about people, about how we listen to, understand and accommodate each other across our different communities, and how we co-create an inclusive, prosperous, promising future on this island, however that is constituted. The agreement also includes important provisions for a civic forum in Northern Ireland and a North-South consultative forum. These are supposed to complement and support the power sharing and North-South political institutions, but are not currently implemented, which has always been a source of regret to me. The government does not lose sight of these civic provisions and will keep engaging with all parties to build the consensus needed to get these key elements of the agreement in place. And at this time, the need for a strong voice and role for civil society in all its dimensions and diversity in the peace process could not be clearer. To help keep focus on the imperative of getting a new power-sharing executive formed and the North-South Ministerial Council meeting again without any further delay. We are seeing a denial of the mandate given by the people in the Northern Ireland Assembly election last May, and this has to be addressed by everyone in a position of responsibility to get the executive in place again and working for everyone's interests in Northern Ireland. And this is all the more pressing as we face into a difficult and economically challenging winter. So many in civil society in the North are also helping to make the case for finding jointly agreed European Union United Kingdom solutions around the implementation of the protocol to resolve genuine concerns of people and businesses while maximising the benefits of the protocol for all in Northern Ireland, and I thank you for it. With the right political will, I have no doubt that solutions can be found on the issues around the implementation of the protocol. There is an opportunity now to inject fresh impetus into European Union United Kingdom discussions, and the government will keep working to support that. It is essential also that civil society keeps contributing to the repairing and reinvigorating of relationships across our communities and borders to help get beyond the challenges and strains that Brexit has raised in recent years and move on to a more productive agenda, squarely focused on making this island a better place for all communities. On all of these issues, there are roles and responsibilities for political leaders in Northern Ireland to live up to and for the two governments as co-guarantors of the agreement. As Taoiseach, I promise you that the Irish government will play our part and keep working sincerely in support of all of the institutions, principles and commitments of the Good Friday Agreement. We will do so interacting with and listening to civil society and communities across all traditions on this island. It is in this sensitive and at times contested and challenging social and political context that the iCommunity project has operated successfully over the last year, focusing on building on existing connections and scoping out means for new and sustainable links, harnessing the strong desire that is palpable in the community and voluntary sector to work together towards common goals, recognising also that many in civil society have not had the scope or indeed the opportunity to look at cross-border cooperation before, and that some in Northern Ireland have genuine concerns or suspicions about all-island interaction, which should be acknowledged and addressed. Today's report illustrates the hugely positive dynamic that is there when people north and south simply collaborate on things that matter for them and their communities, like developing social enterprise, working for just transition, and advancing digital inclusion. It was heartening to read that when people were asked for their views after iCommunity workshops on these and other common aims, the predominant feeling was hopeful, followed by confident and excited. We need to nurture and grow that hope, confidence and excitement in our civic relationships on this island. This is the iCommunity Hub. And reading today's report, there are 4 I's associated with the project that particularly strike me: inclusivity, innovation, impact and initiative. Your inclusive community hub is one that has worked to involve people from all traditions and backgrounds on this island. Importantly also including ethnic minority communities, both new and long-standing, who comprise significant parts of our society, both north and south. Their perspectives and experiences help to inform and enrich how we look at our relationships across the board on this island. And this is an innovative community hub, which has impressively navigated challenges of the pandemic, of geographic distance, and of diverse starting points in communities, employing new and creative means, both online and in person, to help develop shared narratives on the why of cross-border cooperation, and to work from common goals through to specific actions to substantiate the how and the what of collaboration. This is also an impact-oriented community, dealing with topics that have real significance for people's lives and a strong basis for cross-border interaction. And clearly, it is a community hub with huge initiative, fostering new partnerships between community and voluntary groups, charities and social enterprises. Truly, the iCommunity hub reflects the unique convening and consensus building capacity of the community and voluntary sector. I'd like to conclude with a few words on the recommendations in today's report and how they inform our Shared Island initiative. The project makes recommendations across 5 thematic areas. On the climate change and biodiversity crisis, the need for support for scaling up community-led solutions is highlighted. This has also been a strong message coming through from our Shared Island Dialogue series and in the work of the National Economic and Social Council. I see it secured most attention in the iCommunity workshops as a powerful, quote, powerful and tangible opportunity for all island collaboration, unquote. The government agrees fully, and we are responding to this through our Community Climate Action Programme. The second major strand will launch this year and will now include a specific cross-border dimension enabled by an allocation of €3 million from the government's Shared Island Fund, with at least half of the funding going to project delivery in the north. Supporting local authorities to step up climate action by working with communities. This will remain a major focus for government in our Shared Island approach. iCommunity is also making recommendations on the themes of social enterprise, rural development and digital inclusion, emphasising opportunities for deeper collaboration and networking. And these themes are also explored in a lively Shared Island dialogue in Monaghan in May, convened by Minister for Rural and Community Development Heather Humphreys TD, with over 200 stakeholders from north and south. In follow-up, the government is looking to deepen our cooperation in these areas. In particular, looking at how we could roll out connected hubs on collaborative north-south basis as effective enablers of rural regeneration, social enterprise and for digital inclusion. The iCommunity project has made conclusions also on recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, and I would like to acknowledge and pay tribute to the massive and truly heroic contribution of the community and voluntary sector and of charities across this island during the pandemic. The positive impact, innovations and insights of the sector through the course of the pandemic will rightly now be central to how public policy for full societal recovery is shaped. And finally, I want to refer to the cross-cutting recommendations from the project. These focus on the significant untapped potential of all-island civic interaction. The specific recommendations made warrant consideration and reflection, and that will be undertaken as all government departments work now to develop new policy, investment and cooperation initiatives as part of our Shared Island initiative. Already in developing the Peace Plus programme, funded by the European Union, United Kingdom Government, Irish Government and the Executive, we have made provision for a new theme to support citizen-level cooperation around shared challenges on a cross-border basis. This will provide at least €20 million in funding over the 6 years of the programme. And the government is also going to introduce a new Shared Island civil society funding scheme this year. Minister for Foreign Affairs Simon Coveney today will open the first pilot call for applications later this month. This new scheme will complement the vital work supported through the government's Reconciliation Fund, which has been doubled in recent years. And I'm pleased that iCommunity has recently been awarded, as has been said, a Reconciliation Fund grant for the next phase of your work. The spirit, the energy and connection to people's lives that is innate to civil society interaction, part of your very DNA, is fundamental to how we deepen our relationships across the different communities and political traditions on this island. It is how we can all come to see and know each other, not by old, sterile community labels or colours, but by contemporary, compelling, shared community goals and achievements. The simple power of connections between people is fundamental to realising the full potential of the peace process. This is what the iCommunity Hub is contributing so much to, taking the hopeful, exciting, confident next steps in the journey of reconciliation we continue on this island, founded on the Good Friday Agreement. I commend this report and thank you very much indeed for all your work.
Thank you so much, Taoiseach, for that response. You saw on the video that she's been here since the beginning. This project, as we've talked about, happened over quite a short space of time. It was launched on December 6th last year, and I joined the Zoom, as did Minister Hargey, as my first day on the job as iCommunity Director. So I'm delighted to welcome her back. Minister Hargey, if you'd like to come up.
Thanks very much, Susie, and thank you to everybody. And I was actually laughing when I had seen that. It was obviously in December last year when you launched this initiative, and that was still in the midst of obviously COVID that was still playing out. And I was just laughing that I noticed Simon's lovely shiny professional backdrop, and mine's being a probably community worker by background was in my upstairs bedroom, which was converted into a semi-office. Working from home that day, and I just noticed the lamp had actually fallen behind me, so it's a note to check your background before you do Zoom calls. But I'm obviously delighted to finally be here in person to join many of the activists that work within our amazing voluntary and community sector right across this island for the launch of this important booklet and the work that's really going to flow from it over the next period of time. I'm delighted to be joined by the Taoiseach as well in terms of the roles that we take on by way of governance and the politics across this island also. And again, we're hearing this afternoon about the support of this island-wide initiative, the launch of the important iCommunity report, which starts to look at the issues that impact on our people, on our communities, and of course on our environment. And as Seamus said, I mean, societies change, they evolve, and with that comes new challenges and opportunities that we have to raise in terms of meeting those issues. And importantly, collaboration across our island isn't new, it's definitely needed. But it's not new in terms of how we engage, whether that's through business, whether that's through politics, through sport, the environment, or built heritage, through agriculture, through biodiversity. We are forever engaging and interacting and have done on a regular basis as well. But of course, this is an exciting project in how we can tackle common challenges and opportunities, particularly looking at our voluntary and community sectors, and enable to offer our continued support to those communities, to those structures, to ensure that we are building sustainable infrastructures at the grassroots, but also regionally and more strategically across the island. I think it is important, particularly that we do target interventions at those who are more challenged through environmental, societal or economic changes. And indeed, we've really seen that over the last few years with the COVID pandemic and now with the cost of living crisis as well. Again, I do want to take this opportunity to thank Seamus and Deirdre and all of your teams at NICFA and the Wheel for the hard work, leadership and dedication that you have shown, not just in developing this programme and producing the report, but the work that you've done in engaging and encouraging the community and voluntary sector to work together, to engage, to plan, to agitate, and to lobby for the type of changes and resources that are needed as well. And I don't think you ever retire from this job, so I'm sure Seamus will be going on to do other things, and of course Deirdre has already found those other things as well. But I do wish you as well in the time ahead in terms of your future roles, and I know that you're leaving two strong organisations that are going to continue that engagement, that collaboration and work, and importantly that agitation and activism that is needed within our communities as well. I do want to particularly commend the approach that's been taken of co-design and inclusion of new voices and perspectives, lived experiences and fresh evidence within this report and within the workshops that have taken place, all of which are integral to policy and decision making for better outcomes for our people. And our island is changing. We all have a really unique opportunity to shape what that change looks like. And for me, I think that's the real exciting proposition that we have in front of us in the time ahead. I'm proud that my own department's Regional Infrastructure Support Programme was able to provide funding to support this joint initiative that has brought our communities together from right across our island, north, south, east and west, to discuss solutions to our shared challenges. And I want to acknowledge more generally the inspiring work of both the Wheel and NICFA and the broader voluntary and community sector. As someone who has come from this sector, I've been a community activist from I was 12. I come from a family of community activists who still work in the inner city working class community that I live in, the market area in South Belfast. And for me, activism, it's not just a career path, it's probably a calling, it's a way of life for communities and for people who are involved in it. And again, I just want to commend all of our community activists, all of our organisers, all of our agitators for the ingenuity, I suppose for the leadership and for the building of bridges that you have been doing over many years and decades. You've been to the fore of helping the most vulnerable within our communities to deal with two societal shocks in recent years, the COVID pandemic and now the cost of living crisis, with the most impoverished and deprived feeling the impact of these shocks more acutely. And we know the different sections of our population that are more adversely impacted when we see societal shocks take place. That's our women, our children, those with disabilities, our working class communities and minority ethnic communities as well. And that's why, in terms of a social recovery, we need a step change to overcome the systemic inequalities and issues of poverty that impact on our communities right across this island. And of course, the Shared Island, Shared Practices work provides us with an excellent opportunity to bring together civil society on both parts of our island to address these shared challenges that affect people and communities right across our space. And of course, for the creation of a cohesive and inclusive society moving forward. Again, I want to welcome the focus of the iCommunity report, which is about providing a vision and building on existing connections that scope the potential mechanisms for new and sustainable links across our island. We're all facing challenges at present, and these do include the cost of living, as I've touched on, the COVID pandemic, and the impact that that has on communities, an impact that we haven't really seen yet, but that will continue to build, particularly around issues of mental health and well-being, around family cohesion, around just the ability to live day by day and to ensure that you can afford even the basic necessities of heating your home and having a meal on the table as well. And of course, all of these are impacted by the broader politics, particularly around Brexit and the need to respond to our climate change concerns. And we can't continue to do what's been done before. We must create something better. We must try to steer our way through the challenges that we face collectively, and it's imperative that we continue to collaborate and work together as an island to build the capacity of the voluntary and community sector and to enable it to offer a renewed support for communities, particularly when challenging poverty and inequality.
We must build back a more just society that proactively builds participation, inclusion and sustainability. A society that delivers equality of outcome, not just opportunity, for our people and our communities. This report sets out a vision for a society that strengthens social, economic and environmental rights and protections for all. The specific themes have been identified within the programme around rural sustainability, recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, developing the island economy, digital inclusion, and achieving a just transition to a decarbonised island resonate very strongly, not just with me, but I'm sure with many communities and families right across Ireland. The challenges are common, but so too are the solutions. And we must tap into the experience of organisations across our island and spread the learning for everyone to benefit. Whilst the recommendations within some of the themes will cut across the responsibility of other executive departments, we know that these won't be resolved in a siloed approach. We need to embrace collaboration within and across government, as well as within and across communities. We need to ensure that the recovery is fair and that it protects everyone. We have to see transformative change to our economy that must work in the interests of broader society. This complements the work of my department in continuing to take forward a community wealth building approach, a people-centred approach to local economic development, which redirects wealth back into the local economy and places the control and benefits into the hands of local people and communities. Community wealth building offers a foundation for a more balanced recovery, and I'm championing this approach within my department and exploring ways that the principles and practices to deliver improved community outcomes on the ground through local economic models. That's looking at public procurement. It's looking at the roles of our anchor institutions and what they can do within the recovery. It's looking at fair and just employment practices, the right to unionise, the right to collective bargaining. It looks at our financial institutions. Where does economic power rest? And how do we use financial power in the interests of our people, our communities and our local places? The lived experiences and challenges from our colleagues within the Voluntary and Community Centre will be instrumental to the successful design and delivery of future services across our island. To build a sustainable foundation for the recovery and renewal, the voluntary and community sector are a critical part of the foundation and collaboration that is needed in the time ahead. And again, I want to wish as well on that journey. As was touched on, we are a society emerging from conflict. We're a society that has emerged from division. And I think one thing that it's taught me as a community activist, as someone who's worked on the interfaces within Belfast, particularly where violence often spilled out onto the streets, and now as Minister in the Department of Communities, our history and our experience is shared. It doesn't run in straight lines. It's a lot more layered and complex. And part of the solution in building a really cohesive society going forward is to ensure that it is interdependent, that we do depend on each other as social beings and as human beings, that we are interconnected, and that we are working together to really build a truly inclusive, fair and just society going forward that protects the most vulnerable within our communities as well. So again, this sits so well with what we're trying to do as a department, what we're trying to do with an executive, and obviously the priority is to get the power sharing executive in the north up and running again, that we can work across our island and indeed across our islands in terms of building a better future for all. So again, I want to thank the Wheel, I want to thank NICFA, I want to thank all of our community activists and practitioners who work day in and day out on the ground. I want to continue to work with yous in making sure that we're building the infrastructure, that we're building the capacity, that we're investing in looking at the longevity of the sector going forward, but importantly that we are delivering for people and for the next generation as well. So Gormila Mayoga, thank you.
Thank you for both those addresses. I'm aware that the Taoiseach has to slip quietly away to another event, a very busy day today, so we appreciate the time you gave us and the response from both of you to be so enthusiastic and to see how everything weaves together so well. So thank you very much. So for our next speakers, by the way, the event is being live streamed. You may have seen the event being recorded as you came in this morning. So I was assured that the Taoiseach has the ability to watch the rest of the event either live stream now as he goes to wherever he's going or later on the recording. So what we're going to hear from now are some of the participants who took part in one or other aspect of iCommunity's work this year. So we had a podcast and we had lots and lots of engagement sessions. So I'm welcoming, we had on our podcast, we had Hilary from Fighting Words, and we have two young people from Northern Ireland who've travelled down to us today who are going to read a piece each, and it's really, I think Fighting Words exists in Dublin and it exists in Northern Ireland, and it's about giving expression for young people and giving them the ability to write, to tell their narratives, to share their perspective. And that's something that the inclusive eye that the Taoiseach referred to, like we really are trying extremely hard in iCommunity to make sure that the voices that aren't always in the room are in the room and to hear from as many different perspectives as possible. So I'd like you to welcome, I think first you can both come up together if you like, Keela and Patrick. And Keela's going to read her piece, Can We Say We Tried? And then Patrick will read his piece, Intersection. So both of you, welcome.
We can say we tried to end this global feud. Our own planet died. Earth won't be renewed. The ignite of blazing fire, splitting the evergreen, burning hope started to tire as our fight went unseen. The world crumbled beneath while we stomped on the ground, yelling through gritted teeth, still not a sound. We called on the politicians, the directors of the sphere. They nod to our mission. They can't see our fear. A question struck my thought. I lowered my cardboard poster. Was there worth in what I sought when the end was coming closer? As the globe dissolved, we witnessed the fall. Rising waves, sun evolved. The leaders did nothing at all. There wasn't a planet 2 when our world was set ablaze. There was no campaign to do when we ran out of days. Tell history we're accountable for how our planet died. For when the end was stoppable, we can't say we tried.
The intersection. Our rivers roll and mountains crest in free form through borders oblivious of constraints. Our problems spill as diverse brews of reform. Our people, we seek an end to restraint. Cooperation, a luxury, two weary hands amidst the haze. Ignorance, its choked murk of drudgery, dissipates steadily through our appraise. Green, orange, white, red, a conglomeration, diverse swathes of furious stupor. Generations respond across our nations, friendship in the face of a fearful future. Billowing toxicity plagues our parched fields, our island convalesces, scars fade. Secluded communities unite hands healed, collaboration, wonders of equality displayed. We can't promise we'll solve all your problems, cease anxiety seeping through the unknown. We can't promise we'll solve all your problems, but we can promise that you'll never face them alone.
Thank you, both of you, for very clear pieces and real calls to action, I think, as well. So I'm going to ask Iva Pocock, where are you hiding? Iva, who participated in the workshop on on climate change and the SDGs. And Iva is a journalist and a communications consultant, but she's also worked with a European-wide network of networks called Ecolease that focuses on supporting community-led climate action. So Iva.
Thanks very much, Susie. Minister Seamus, Deirdre, it's an honour to be here today. So I went along to one of the conversations that was hosted by the iCommunity, I think it was in May, and I was feeling particularly low, no work and, the pandemic, no paid work, that is. And I went along and it was the conversation about climate change. And I have to say I found it a real shot in the arm because there was a diversity of people at the conversation. There were people from the Midlands Just Transition project in the Midlands of Ireland. I remember meeting the sustainability officer of the Peter McVerry Trust. I had no idea that there was such a role, looking at how they could make their buildings more sustainable. And so the theme of, I think, the initiative of iCommunity to try to bring together people across the island working in the NGO and the civil and community sector is incredibly laudable. And on that day, the theme of climate change is so pertinent as well, because the fact of the matter is that methane and carbon dioxide knows no borders, and that is why we are dealing with it at an international scale. So the notion that we could somehow deal with it here on this one little biogeographical island that we all live on, and that is divided into two jurisdictions, the idea that we could deal with that without collaborating it's completely absurd. So I think what the iCommunity has done thus far is to lay the foundations of this deeply, much more intense collaboration. And some of the initiatives that were shared on that day during those conversations and also during the podcast, listen to it if you haven't. I can't admit that I've listened to all of them, but the few that I have, they're really superb. So some of the initiatives that have been shared that demonstrate what is happening at community level in terms of a just transition and of dealing with the biggest challenge that we all face, that of the climate emergency, include things like the All-Island Schools Programme, Educational Schools Programme, which is looking at both environmental education, bringing together schools from Belfast and Lurgan and Galway, schools in the north and the south, so looking at environmental education, but also building cross-border understanding and collaboration. There are also initiatives like the River Trust that Alex mentioned. There are 17 Rivers Trusts now set up, as I understand, in Ireland, covering about a third of the land mass. Again, our river basins, our catchment basins, do not take any heed of the border. And the main one being the Erne, which I understand, I think, rises in Cavan, flows through the north, and then flows into the Atlantic in Ballyshannon in Donegal. How can we look at, improving our water quality and tackling the biodiversity crisis if we're not looking at it from an all-island perspective? The other projects which I think are really which really struck me as extremely valuable in sharing, are the Just Transition project in the Irish Central Border Area as part of the Irish Central Border Area Network. The work that has been done in the Midlands of Ireland, looking at how do communities survive and thrive when the economic foundation upon which they have relied for decades, i.e., the industrial mining of our peatlands, is ending. So these are huge challenges. Again, there's an excellent initiative in Dingle looking at working very closely between communities and farmers in particular to look at how can Dingle become energy sustainable, neutral, carbon neutral. So these are some of the initiatives that have been already been given more air thanks to the iCommunity project. And I'm extremely grateful to Susie and to the team in NICFA and the support in NICFA and the Wheel for what they have done with the iCommunity. And I really look forward to what you're going to be able to do with the next tranche of funding, which I understand you have received from the Shared Island Initiative from the Department of the Taoiseach. So the Taoiseach mentioned the word hopeful, and it's in the report. And I certainly, at that conversation, just down the quays earlier in the year, hope was the main sentiment that I came away with. And I think, given the absolutely massive challenges that we face globally, but also on this island, I think that the iCommunity has been launched now with this beautiful report, and was going to continue is really something to bring us hope again. So thank you.
Thanks, Susie.
So one of the challenges, especially as we were running this program this year, as we were coming out of the pandemic, was to get people to meet face to face. So we did create online meetups, and we also added hybrid, so that people could come face to face or not. And then, of course, we're also adding to that, will you come across a border? Will you come south? Will you go north? And so the next speaker, Marina Cunningham from Traveller Heritage in Meath, social enterprise, travelled north to Belfast for the social enterprise conversation. And I just wanted to ask her to share a little bit of what she might have learned, or what that meant to her, why she did take all that effort to meet in person and to go travelling.
Thank you, Susie. Maybe it was just a chance to get out of the office and to get to go somewhere. My name is Marina Cunningham, and I am the manager of Meath Traveller Workshop, and we're based in Navan in County Meath. Meath Traveller Workshop has been around for the past 50 years, so it is tried and tested, tested being the word probably to use. So we are a community development organisation who look after everything from upskilling to education programmes. We work with people who are, in a housing crisis. We have a family liaison person. We work with people who are in prisons. So our role, I suppose, is fairly diverse. The organisation itself is a collaboration of members of the travelling community and the settled community. So it is fairly diverse. One of the projects that we have run over the last number of years is a social enterprise project. And we worked with the probation services to run a social enterprise, a small social enterprise. And the idea was that we would employ people who have either a criminal conviction or who are on probation, giving them an opportunity to actually have a job that they can put onto their CV to move forward. So the project is called Kickstart, and that's basically what it is, a kickstart back into society. We linked that to our social enterprise. We currently our heritage project. So we would have a barrel top wagon that goes out to various fairs or to communities, to schools, and the marrying of the two kind of worked really well. The Kickstart project make craft, so crafts that would be specifically about travellers, but not necessarily only for travellers. So we did make 2 presentations earlier today of some of the artwork that we do. We we also engaged, I suppose, in Northern Ireland with the Northern Ireland Western Trust. So as part of the comic relief funding, so we're doing a project in Northern Ireland at the moment, and the wagon has gone up and down. Will go up. Has gone up twice, but will go up another 2 times. Between now and next June, and that has engaged in an awful lot of younger students, regardless of whether they're travellers or members of the settled community. But what it is about is building bridges, and it is showing travellers in a positive light. So for that reason, we are delighted to be involved with the iCommunity project, because it doesn't matter if you're from the north of Ireland or from the south of Ireland. Travellers are from Ireland. So I suppose some of the difficulties in Northern Ireland, they may not, some of the organisations are not as well established, or it is harder to engage. And I suppose that's probably why we got involved with the Western Trust as well. But our project is cross-border and truly cross-border. I have been at a few of the events that we've run, and it doesn't matter whether you're from north or south, the issues are the same. I suppose sometimes the negativity is the same. And being involved with the iCommunity project, it meant that we're talking to people from both sides of the border. We are giving an understanding, I suppose, of where travellers in the south are coming from, but it's an opportunity to meet up with people from both sides of the border, or the divide. I suppose the settled community and the traveller community would be the divide in itself. The crafts that we're making and some children's jigsaws would be a photograph or an image of the likes of the barrel top wagon, which is a great starting or conversation piece for children. It's hard to explain diversity to children. Children seem to be the ones who don't mind about diversity. They don't understand, or they haven't been educated, maybe negatively. So they have learning about diversity at a very early age is really important. So that's kind of, I suppose, where we enjoyed our participation in the iCommunity, because we were able to put across some of that diversity in a positive way. We hope to continue to work as part of the iCommunity and learn. I suppose we hope to learn a lot from the organisations that are there, but we hope to bring something to the organisations as well. I suppose my colleague Laura is with me today, and if I have questions when it comes to the traveller community, Laura answers my questions for me. And I suppose there are lots of things that I would have said in the beginning when I started working, and I would always check to see, is this politically correct? And my answer was always, it's perfectly fine as long as you're not saying it in a negative way. If you're asking the question, what should I say, or will I say the wrong thing? Asking the question is what it's about. So that's kind of what this connection has done for us. It's given us a chance to listen to people ask the questions, but answer the question as well. Thank you.
So I suppose one of the things I want to say is that I've felt enormously privileged to be party to all the conversations, because I get to hear all that kind of shared learning, and how there are lessons from places you don't know there are lessons from about how to talk to each other across different divides, age divides, gender divides, location divides, and ethnicity divides. So I'm going to ask Megan McDermott from the Centre for Cross-Border Studies, who have been in this space, and I think I want to say that anybody else who was already in the space of collaboration on an all-island basis have been incredibly welcoming to us as the new kids on the block with iCommunity, and they've also helped a lot with giving us context because of the kinds of studies and research they do, and one of the outcomes is that both the Wheel and NICFA are now signatories to the charter that Megan might mention just now. So.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks very much. It's a real pleasure to be asked to speak today at this about the iCommunity project and the demand for it in the current context, and also the value that we at the Centre for Cross-Border Studies see in such an initiative and how we've engaged with it. So maybe just to set the scene for our involvement and the need for the iCommunity project. Over the course of 2021, the Centre for Cross-Border Studies undertook 4 quarterly surveys, and that was on the conditions for North-South and East-West cooperation. These are aimed at community organisations and local authorities on the island of Ireland, and the surveys focus on 4 dimensions, so the political, social, regulatory and material contexts for cooperation. Responses to the survey show a really strong commitment to North-South and East-West cooperation among community organisations and local authorities. It also shows a significant determination to maintain cross-border relations and continue collaborative activities, despite what was considered a negative political context. So in that vein, there are indications of an emerging trend that should caution against taking the commitment to cooperation of community organisations for granted, particularly those in the Republic of Ireland. The decline in respondents from the public to the surveys, coupled with other evidence gathered by the Centre, suggests a risk of emerging, although still isolated, attitudes among some civic society organisations in the South. What the surveys show is that a small number of organisations that have limited resources and various competing organisational priorities within their own jurisdiction are beginning to view cross-border cooperation with Northern Ireland as potentially overly problematic, and therefore they may feel increasingly reluctant to engage in that cooperation. This is the case, I should say, even if they still recognise the inherent value of cooperation. And unsurprisingly, comments offered by respondents from the Republic also noted decreasing contact with counterparts in Great Britain, resulting from its departure from EU networks and projects. In some instances, this was also seen as being the case for organisations from Northern Ireland. The political context for both North-South and East-West cooperation was seen by 60% of respondents as having deteriorated in the first quarter of 2021, and to have remained more or less the same for the rest of the year. Among the major factors seen as shaping the negative political context was, unsurprisingly, the destabilising effects of political division in Northern Ireland due to attitudes towards the Protocol on Ireland-Northern Ireland and the UK government's relations with the EU. I should say there are important variations between the responses offered by those North and South. So organisations from the Republic in many cases revealed a comparatively more pessimistic view of the underlying context for North-South and East-West cooperation. Although responses saw the social context for cooperation as being affected by political tensions, the majority response was that community support for North-South cooperation was relatively stable. The same was the case in relation to the social context for East-West cooperation. So what does this mean? In essence, what we have is a long-running commitment to cooperation among civil society groups and local authorities. The value in which this cooperation is held amongst these groups is unwavering, but the political and regulatory context for its continuation and growth is under pressure. It's in this context that a long-running project of the Centre's has been rejuvenated. It's called the New Common Charter for Cooperation Within and Between These Islands. It aims to empower civic society to drive cooperation North-South and East-West. It's a celebration of the many existing cooperation efforts and an encouragement of future collaborations. It was agreed as part of a significant process of dialogue between 2014 and 2019 among a broad range of civil society organisations from across the island of Ireland, and then with further consultation from civil society in England, Scotland and Wales. The Charter is essentially a set of agreed principles for civic society organisations who participate in North-South and East-West cooperation. So this includes, but isn't limited to, recognising the importance of increasing opportunities to share information, knowledge of policy, best practice within and across these islands, improving policy making by matching it to realities on the ground, and identifying cross-border opportunities to collaborate to solve shared problems or exploit common resources. iCommunity is a prime example of these principles in practice, and I'm delighted that the Wheel and NICFA are both supporters of the Charter. We at the Centre have had the opportunity to collaborate with iCommunity in this vein, as have a number of organisations who are strong supporters of the Charter and live out its principles in their work. So 2 of these supporters, the Longford Women's Link and Rural Community Network NI, recently discussed the importance of the Charter's principles in one of the iCommunity Across the Divides podcasts, which focused on rural connections. It was a real pleasure to work with Alex and Susie, who put in really Trojan work on that element of the project. Rural issues have a strong voice in the Charter, including issues of rural transport, rural digital connectivity and digital divides, as well as digital poverty and skills gaps among all ages. As an example of the intersectionality required with cooperation efforts, these were also among the core issues raised by the youth sector representatives in a recent review of the Charter's principles. Many of these issues are tackled by the iCommunity initiative, which has been seeking to facilitate debate and shared learning among organisations right from the beginning, at its project launch, as well as at workshops on rural connectivity and sustainability and digital connectedness and inclusion. What's particularly valuable about the iCommunity project is its emphasis on showcasing what works, platforming existing best practice and championing cross-border cooperation, both where it's emerging and where it has existed for a long time. In the challenging political context which our survey results point to, organisations who engage in cooperation work may be tempted to shy away from the limelight, pushing evidence of their good work underground and hindering the natural snowball effect that visible cooperation begets further cooperation. And so the championing of existing practical and valuable forms of civil society cooperation is the guarantee of its proud survival, as well as the encouragement needed to foster its continued growth. This element of the iCommunity project, along with the facilitation of shared best practice, is of course not a once-off exercise, but an ongoing process. Just as the goal of cooperation is something to be continually nurtured and monitored for emerging barriers. As our survey results show, the value of cooperation is something civil society organisations are hugely supportive of and invested in, but we can't take for granted that this will remain this way without facilitation and support at multiple levels. So this is the work that iCommunity has committed to doing, and we're very much hoping to see it sustained into the future, and glad that it will be. To Susie and to Alex on the team at the wheel and NICFA, I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to collaborate, and I congratulate you on the launch of the report, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
So that brings us nearly to a close. I want to just say that, you know, landing into work in an organisation that was actually working in two organisations, Seamus said I'm on the list of employees of NICFA and of the Wheel, was absolutely fantastic. They have been incredible to work with, and I want to not go away without naming Jeff Nuttall and Ivan Cooper, who head up the policy side of the house in both organisations, because it was their vision really, along with Deirdre and Seamus, that created the idea of iCommunity and then handed to me to implement. So they, you know, they've been really, really supportive all along, and lots of that local intelligence of community and voluntary organisations is held within their umbrella organisations, and so there is this intelligence to tap into, and there is a team in the room as well that can pull off events like this very seamlessly. So I think I'm just going to close with Deirdre's just going to say a few words to close the event, and then we have lunch for more connections to build this vibrant, to use Alex's analogy, ecosystem of connections, not fragmented but interconnected. And so, Deirdre, to you to close.
Thank you very much.
Minister, Seamus, boss, otherwise known as Vincent, the chair of the wheel. Friends, colleagues, guests, thank you very much. I really have an unscripted last couple of remarks to make, but a number of people have made reference to my departure from the wheel at the end of the year, which is a recent development. And I guess, therefore, this will be my last opportunity to pay tribute to Susie, just in terms of actually taking that vision from Ivan and Jeff, Ivan in the Wheel and Jeff in Northern Ireland, and for doing such magic to that vision and doing it justice in so many more ways than any of us could have ever thought possible. So I really want to take this opportunity to say that to Susie in front of you all, and to... And it's the first time I've met Alex. I've heard his name many, many times, but I tell you, after a speech like that, Alex, I'll be coming to hear you whenever you're speaking in future. So thank you very much for your contribution as well. It was clearly very, very impressive. And I'd like to thank the Department of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Communities in the North, because it is those two, I guess, who have provided the engine of the funding, which has made the phase 1 possible and which opens up the possibility of a phase 2. So that's really, really important, as is the, I guess, the softer leadership support from the Department of the Taoiseach in terms of that support, that championing and that vision in the first place that gave us a harbour in which to, I guess, plant, whatever, you get with me. So just in terms of, to where to bring those ideas to further develop. So thank you very much. I'll be seeing you over the next few months. And I can't leave without recommending that you listen to the podcasts. They were a revelation to me, right? And I'm leaving here after 23 years. So I listened to them earlier this year and I learned a whole load of things that perhaps I'd wished I'd learned several years ago. So Across Divides is the name of it. I really commend it to you. And I'd like to lastly finish off by thanking Megan, Marina, Iva, and most particularly Kyla and Patrick. Your collective inputs were really, really stunning. And, Kyla and Patrick, keep up the good work. Your writing has a long way to go. So thank you very much. And, sorry. And lunch is upstairs, so bring your belongings with you and let's network in person, which is something we haven't done for quite some time. Thank you very much.